The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. Love being with you. And I want to share something super exciting. So, just past this month, I was able to take our profits and help several entrepreneurs across the globe. So thank you for getting my books. I really, really appreciate you. And I want to share that my team reached out to me and said that, hey, Divya, check it out. Your book is #1 on Canada Amazon Marketplace. And I was like, oh my goodness, having my book #1 in that marketplace after 32 months is amazing for expert to influencer. And folks, I could not have done that without you. You are amazing, and I wanted to say a big thank you. And for those, if you're thinking about getting the books, please do get books. If you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, the Entrepreneur's Garden will walk you through the whole journey. And expert to influencer, you have an established business or you have unique experience. You have the expertise and you want to become an influencer without having thousands of followers and piecing everything together, then Expert to Influencer is the book for you. So thank you, everyone. And again, I have my call to action. Donate 1 hour of your time every month to someone with no strings attached. And think about it, even if it is 20 million, 30 million, 80 million, 100 million, if so many people started donating their time every month, we are talking so much time that can go towards making our society better, our community better, your personal life better. Doesn't matter who you spend your time with, and just doing something for them. You can split the time over the month. You can use 10 minutes at a time, totally up to you. I love hearing your stories. And one story I do want to share is that this is a story from Julia. Thank you, Julia, for reaching out and sharing your story with us. So Julia decided to surprise her sister. She gave her a surprise visit, and she had let know her sister that she was going to come. And her sister was just kind of surprised, and she took her sister for a lunch without any occasion. And Julia shared with us that both sisters cried, and it was just amazing for them. So thank you, Julia, for sharing your story. So appreciate you. And folks, we'd love to hear your story and share it out on our podcast. So if you're open, share it and we'll share it. All right, let's bring in our guest, Cecil Harris. He's an author and sports writer. Welcome, Cecil.
Thank you for inviting me, Divya. Congratulations on the success of your books.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So, Cecil, we usually start out with a moment in childhood. So, do you recall any moment that left its mark on you in your childhood, or you remember something that's still with you today?
Well, when I was in high school, Franklin D. Roosevelt High School in Brooklyn, New York, I wrote an essay for my English class. And the English teacher, Mr. Glass, as I recall, He said, "This is one of the finest essays I've ever read. You have a future as a writer." He was the first person to say to me, "You have a future as a writer." I wasn't sure what I wanted to be in high school. I,
Mm,
like most boys, I thought I'd want to be a professional athlete in some sport. And that can be a curse, not a blessing, because too many boys tend to focus too much on sports and they don't develop their skills or abilities in other areas, and only a small percentage of the boys who want to be athletes actually become professional athletes. So when he said to me, "I have a future as a writer," I really began to take that seriously. And I have gone on to become a journalist and an author of 4 books. So I really appreciated hearing that from a high school teacher that I respected.
mm. And isn't it fascinating? Just sometimes we forget how much power do we have to influence somebody's lives. And teachers, especially, it's just amazing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
your teacher shared that with you, and it stayed with you for the rest of your life. And then I've heard some horror stories where teachers have told students, like, oh, you can't do that.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
why not pick on the strength? And I firmly believe that every one of us has a strength in some area. Everybody has that zone of
Mhm.
genius. So if we can see that in someone else and share it with them, you could be transforming not only one life, but lives around that person. So, so powerful. I love that story.
Thank you. I
So,
agree
as
with
you
you.
continued, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It really put me on the right path. And it's so discouraging to hear when teachers don't give positive feedback and try to discourage students from chasing their dreams. It's sad to hear. It really shouldn't happen. You should always try to build young people up and give them the message to dream big and work hard. Don't stay small. Don't assume you can't do something.
Hmm. So, share with us your journey. I'm assuming that you move into journalism or literature. How did that pan out?
Well, I attended Fordham University. I did some homework. I wanted to become a sports journalist. I knew by then, by the time I went to college, that I was not going to be an athlete for a living, but I wanted to write. So becoming a sports journalist was the next best thing. And Fordham University, here in New York, where I am, turns out a great many sports journalists. So I majored in media studies with an emphasis in print journalism. I wrote for the school newspaper. It's always a great place to get experience. You're all amateurs, but you're writing for the professors who are the student advisors, and they tell you what you need to improve on, what you do well,
Mm,
what you don't do quite so well. And Dr. Elizabeth Stone was was the faculty advisor for our school newspaper, and she's a friend of mine to this day. She was very instrumental in helping me develop my own writing style. And I took an internship at Gannett Newspapers in Westchester County, New York, one summer. And that's when I knew that writing was for me. I got a chance to write and edit the work of professional journalists. And I knew that if I kept working hard at it, I would become a professional myself. And before I graduated from Fordham, I was offered a part time job writing sports. And after I graduated, I went on to work for the paper full time.
oh, that's so powerful. And there are so many times what happens is that students are taking their majors and don't make full use of what's available. And I really like what you shared is that it doesn't matter. Everybody's an amateur at school paper. And the key is what you shared is that you have the professors guiding you, holding your hand. And this is such a wonderful playground where even if you make mistakes, and it's important to make mistakes because without
Yes.
mistakes, you don't learn and you don't. I always think that, rather than going narrow and shallow, when you make mistakes, you go wide and deep. So it's
Mhm.
important to take
Yes.
advantage of these. So what are there's so many students, who are sometimes caught up either in doing jobs for paying college tuition fees or caught up in like, oh, I gotta have fun during college. What advice might you have for those students?
I think it's important to find something that you like to do that you think you can do for a living. And if you do, then that's fun. I mean, covered sports for many years. It's always been fun for me to do that, but that's also my job. That's also my work. I've had the pleasure of covering the Olympics in Atlanta. That was in 1996, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I got to meet famous people. Muhammad Ali was there, George Foreman, Evander Holyfield, Joe Frazier. These are legendary boxers because I was assigned to cover the boxing matches at Georgia Tech University. So my job is fun because I approach college from the perspective I want to learn the skills to become a professional sports journalist, and that will be fun for me. I didn't approach college as, oh, where's the party tonight? What are we going to do on Friday night? What are we going to do on Saturday night? I made my pursuit of a career a project that was fun. And because the college teams would play on evenings, weekends, I would cover those games for the school newspaper. And it was fun for me because I was developing my skills and learning my craft. So I discourage young people who approach college as something that should only be fun. You should also develop your skills. And no matter what you want to do for a living, if that involves getting better, and you know that from your freshman to sophomore to junior to senior year, you can chart your progress. You can see that by the time you're a senior, oh, I'm a better writer now than I was as a freshman. I can't believe what I wrote as a freshman. You see the growth. I think there's fun in that.
Hmm. Absolutely. Earning your own respect. That's what I call.
Okay.
Don't compare
Yes.
yourself with anyone. Just see the progress. Just see the time you have put in yourself. And I'm all about supporting youngsters because, they are our next generation. They are our future. And these may sound like cliches. And here's what I'll tell that time is so precious. So precious. And I love what you said, Cecil, is that make it fun. And
Yes.
when you make what you're doing fun, then you don't have to worry about having fun. Very powerful. So now you got your full-time job. Tell us, how did you get into more things and share with us about your journey?
Well, once I started covering sports full time, I really enjoyed it. And I got an offer to take a paid internship with the Associated Press in Albany, New York. And that exposed me to being able to write quickly and on deadline. And it was a 12-week internship. I went up to Albany, New York, and met some great journalists there. Some are my friends for life. I met them in the early 90s. And so here we are 30 years later, and many of them are still friends of mine. They had a rule, for example, if they send you to cover a sporting event, your first story has to be in no later than 5 minutes after the game ends. That teaches you to write quickly, to think about what your angle is going to be, and really write as you watch. Don't wait until everything's over and then say, oh, well, I'm going to take a couple of hours now to figure out what I'm going to write. No, you have to write quickly. And that helps me to this day, being able to meet tight deadlines. So that was a really good move for me. I could have stayed with the newspaper in Westchester County, but I wanted to get even better. And I know that the Associated Press is a global news organization, and they're used to sending people out to write stories quickly and get them in quickly, but they're also well written and the facts are straight. And if you're quoting people, you're quoting them accurately. You're doing everything that a journalist needs to do well. And that was a great training ground for me. It really helped me get better.
Mm, yep. It's what I'm thinking over here is that you literally learn to think on your feet.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's what you need to do. It could be a sports story, it could be a news story, it could be a story of human tragedy, but you are there as a reporter and you're getting the information and filing it quickly and then going back and getting more information and filing again because the Associated Press is a wire service, not a newspaper. So you have tight deadlines established by your editor, not by, oh, we have to get the story on the news by 6 o'clock, or we have to get the story in print by 11 o'clock. There, it's a different sort of writing, and you do have to think on your feet, and you have to be accurate and quick. And that helped me enormously. And it also exposed me to covering things besides sports, I would go to the governor's mansion in Albany, New York, and cover a story there, go to a news conference. And that helped me broaden my perspective. It wasn't just about fun and games, it was about serious news as well.
Hmm. So share with us like a couple of highlights of your journey where you're like, yep, I love this. I learned so much from it.
Well, it's interesting. I grew up rooting for the New York Yankees baseball team, but I had a chance to cover them as a writer for Gannett newspapers. When I went from Gannett to the Associated Press internship to the New York Post and then back to Gannett. And when I went back to Gannett to cover baseball, I was a much better journalist because of experiences I had had before, especially with the Associated Press. So when I covered the Yankees, I was the first African American full time beat writer to cover the Yankees. Somebody let me know that. And by beat writer, is someone who covers them from the spring training games in February to the real season, which begins in April, to the final game, whenever it is in October, if it's the playoffs. And it was great to be able to make a small piece of history. Not everybody knows that, but I know it. And I was able to compete with writers from bigger newspapers like the New York Times, the New York Daily News, the New York Post. And when you beat them on stories, there's a sense of pride because you out hustled them. You got there before they did. You got something they didn't get, and it's in the paper, and everyone knows that you wrote it. And there's a satisfaction as a journalist to breaking a story. It takes hard work. It takes developing sources and getting people to trust you. They think enough of your professionalism to say, I can trust him. I can give him this story and he'll get it right. So there's satisfaction in that. And as I continued to do well in my job covering baseball, I got an opportunity and offer to cover the Olympics for Gannett and USA Today. And that happened in 1996. And it was a thrill to cover a huge event such as the Olympics. And it was not in some far off exotic place. It was in Atlanta, Georgia, but I was very happy to be there. And I know the next Olympics in the summer will be in Paris in 2024. So I didn't get to go anywhere glamorous like that, but it was fun to spend 3 weeks in Atlanta at the Olympics, meeting journalists from all over the world, interviewing athletes from all over the world. And it was a major assignment. And um, my mother was still alive then, God bless her. I would send clips of my stories to her, and she would take them to church on Sunday and show them off. My son wrote this.
Oh, what a thrill. Not
that
only
was
for
that was great.
yourself, but for your mom. And
Yes,
so much pride and joy that she could use. And
yes.
Cecil, I gotta tell you, you've gone up a notch in my book because I'm a Yankees fan. And listeners
Ah,
may be saying, I'm partial. Well, I gotta tell you, I'm a longtime Yankees fan. So,
I'll be happy to send you my second book, which was on baseball. It's called Call the Yankees My Daddy. Has to do with growing up a Yankees fan in a Mets household and then becoming a Yankees beat writer, as I mentioned. It's interesting to cover the team that you rooted for as a boy.
oh, of course. And oh
Yeah.
gosh, I can't even imagine growing up in a household that is a Mets fan
We had
because
one television.
rivalry.
It was tough.
Yes.
We had one television, and if the Yankees and Mets were playing at the same time, as they often do, my father and my brother, my older brother, they outvoted me. They would get to watch the Mets on TV, and I would have to listen to the Yankees on the radio.
Oh, that's hilarious. And I said, congratulations on your
Thank you.
achievements. That
Thank
those are
you.
huge accomplishments that you have done in your life. And
Thank
that
you.
goes to show that if you stick to what you do, that you love, and if you stay the course, you can achieve big things in life.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And my adventurous spirit took me to Raleigh, North Carolina in 1998. I saw that the Carolina Hurricanes used to be the Hartford Whalers. They left Hartford, Connecticut. They resettled in Raleigh, and the newspaper in Raleigh, the biggest newspaper, the News and Observer, really did not have anyone who could cover hockey, who really knew the sport well enough. And after their first year in Raleigh, the newspaper launched a search to find someone to cover the team. And I thought that would be a great experience. I had never lived outside of New York State. I applied for the job. I got the job, moved to Raleigh to cover hockey and really help to grow the fan base for the team. It's great now to watch the Carolina Hurricanes play on TV, and the stadium is packed. The arena is packed with 18,000 people. Because I remember many nights when they were playing in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the stadium was not packed. So the sport has grown, and I like to think that I helped with my writing and reporting to help make the sport more popular. And it was a great experience because I met so many people in North Carolina who are still friends of mine, people from the newspaper and people who I met. So it's working in journalism has allowed me to travel a great deal, meet people from different backgrounds, and in many cases, make lifelong friends.
And that's what I like about what you're sharing is that make lifelong friends, make relationships. It's not that you need a source or you need a connection. It's about building those relationships. It's about building a family as you go along.
Yes,
And
yes.
you mentioned about getting your unique voice heard in the landscape of media. Let's say there are young journalists out there, or young entrepreneurs, or for that matter, seasoned entrepreneurs. What would you recommend? How can they get their voice heard?
Well, there are so many great ways to do that now, Divya, through blogging. That's one way. You can establish a blog and write regularly, and people will begin to find out what your passion is, what you know, what you like to write about. And even if you don't have a blog yet, you can comment on what's written in other blogs. And if you comment often enough, you may be asked to write a guest blog for that particular blogger, and that can you can develop a relationship that way. If you're more interested in the broadcast side of things, you can start a podcast or follow certain podcast hosts that you like and communicate with them on a regular basis. And it may lead to you becoming a guest on the show. There's one interesting example I found out about. Uh, Regardless of what people think of his politics, Sean Hannity has had a talk show on the Fox network, Fox News channel for the past 25 years. He started out as someone who would call radio shows of hosts that he agreed with, and that led to him getting a radio job, and that led to him getting a TV job. And now for the past quarter century, he's been on TV 5 nights a week. But again, with him, it started as, oh, I like this show. I'm going to call this show and express my opinions. It's a really good way to have your voice be heard. He didn't have a show, but he liked a show and called. You can do that as a blogger or as a podcast host or as someone who listens to radio, watches TV. You can use social media to comment on what you like, what you don't like. And that can lead to someone saying, well, you have a unique take on things. I like the way you express yourself. I will give you a chance to do that. And that's a good way in this day and age to go from listener or reader to host, blogger, and in many cases, an authority on something.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. It's what you're sharing is so true. It's about going from being a consumer of the content. So just stop consuming. Also, because everybody has a unique take, point, and view. And of course, you have to be true to yourself and also think about that as you're sharing your point of view, are you ready to take a stand behind it? Are
Yes.
you willing to put that stake in the ground? And it doesn't have to be political, it could be a simple thing. So, for example, I'm just going to share what one of my clients did. So, one of my clients was very hesitant and she had lost weight. She did not know what her niche was. She had been going about and exercising and created her own style of food. Oh, she came to me. She was transitioning out of a corporate job and wanted to become an entrepreneur and thinking, what can I do? I said, look at you. You have lost 75 pounds. You yourself can be a poster child and start blogging, as you mentioned. And again, the key goes back to how do you show up? How do you build those relationships? It's not just about writing your blog and putting it out there in a dark hole somewhere. It's about going, commenting. It's about building those relationships. And those are some very powerful techniques that you shared.
Yes. Yes, you're
And
building relationships, no doubt about it.
yep, and you kind of like taking a detour from there. I know you have covered Williams sisters. So
Yes.
can you tell us your relationship? And of course, everybody's fascinated with Williams sisters, just their achievements and the tenacity and
Yes.
the world-class athletes they are. So we'd love to hear about that.
Well, yes, they are amazing. Venus and Serena Williams are really the most successful sibling act in the history of sports. And I saw tennis as just an assignment for me. I would occasionally be assigned to cover the US Open here in New York in the early 90s before the Williams sisters were even heard of. And tennis was just an assignment for me. I didn't have an emotional attachment to any of the players. But in 1994, Venus Williams was 14, and her father, Richard Williams, was making noise about how she's going to be the best player in the world someday. Now, tennis is a predominantly white sport. Venus Williams, a black girl from Compton, California, which is not exactly a tennis hotbed. Yet her father was touting her, praising her, telling everyone who would listen, my daughter Venus is going to be the best player in the world. So that got my interest. And when Venus played her first tournament in Oakland, California, Halloween night, 1994, I stayed up late to get the results from the West Coast. Venus won her first match, lost her second to the second best player in the world, so no shame in that. But she showed everyone who was there, everyone who was paying attention, that she is going to be a future star. She did have enormous talent, and her parents showed her unconditional love, and they were her biggest fans. And I think that had a lot to do with it too. She got nothing but encouragement and love from her father and her mother, Oracene Price. So I started following the Williams sisters very closely. I didn't actually write about them until the year 2000 when Venus was 20 and her younger sister Serena was 19. But by then, they were both on the verge of becoming global superstars. And I follow them very closely. I once wrote for a website called williamssisters.com, and it was all about what the Williams sisters were doing at all these tournaments. And then I got to write about them at the US Open. I went to Wimbledon, the famous tournament in England, to watch them play. I've seen them play at the Australian Open. I've seen them play at the French Open. And I'm I find it so remarkable that these two young women fulfilled the promise that their father laid out for them. Many people thought he was just nuts. What does he mean they're going to be the two best players in the world? But it happened. And here they are now in the year 2022. They haven't retired yet. Venus is 42. She will be 42 in June. Serena will be 41 in September. They're still active players. They're not retired because they've always been able to put tennis in the proper perspective. It's not eat, sleep, and drink tennis. It's doing other things as well. Serena's married. She has a daughter. Venus has business interests. Serena has business interests. And they still have made time for tennis, but not just tennis. I'm fascinated at the way they manage their time so well and avoid burnout by making sure they have other things in their lives that they enjoy.
Mm. So there is this adage for anything, regardless whether you are a piano virtuoso or you are an athlete or you are a top-notch painter, that you gotta eat, drink, and sleep. So you have showed by taking an example of Williams sisters that they've been able to create a harmony between their passion and their life. So what would you say to people that you gotta do that?
I think it's so important to be as well rounded as possible. I learned that from watching them because I've seen so many tennis players come up and they show a great deal of promise when they're young, but they burn out or they find, oh, I don't like tennis anymore once they start losing for the first time. But if you have other things going on in your life, then it's not all about the outcome of a tennis match. Oh, you don't feel worthless if you've lost. You have so many other things going on. And I've learned from watching Venus and Serena, it's important to have other interests. It's also important to have love within the family. Venus and Serena truly love each other. I've written two of my four books are on tennis, and the last two are dealing extensively with the Williams sisters and that family dynamic because of the love they get from their father and their mother. The parents are divorced, but obviously the parents still love their daughters unconditionally. And the two sisters, Venus and Serena, love each other. And I think that good advice to give someone on that score is make sure that you are well rounded. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Have other things in life that give you joy, that bring you satisfaction, bring you pleasure. So you're not just relying on what may happen on your job. You have a more
Mm.
fulfilling life.
So, what stayed with me was that you're not fully dependent on one thing. And let's say if you lose a match, you don't feel defeated. And
Yes.
this kind of plays into that living a full life. And when you have more areas that are enriching your life, then you can bring your even better best
Yes. That's so
through
true.
that match. And you're coming a full wholesome rather than with that pressure and stress and anxiety that what will happen. And that I from what you're sharing is that it feels like it allows you to blossom even more than just being focused 24 by 7.
I agree. I think the Williams sisters have shown that they have so many other interests, not so many that they spread themselves too thin, but interests besides tennis. They are globally known as tennis stars, but that's not the only thing they do. And you're so true. You're so in what you say. If all you do is tennis and you lose a big match, you could feel defeated. You could feel down on yourself. But if you know, oh, the sun's going to come up the next day and you have other things going on and you have the love of family and good friends and other career pursuits, you'll always know that you have value. You always will approach that next day with a smile and with enthusiasm because it's not all about the outcome of any one match or any one game. And I think that's a very important life lesson. I think people can really look at their example and see that even though they both turned professional at 14 and now they're both in their early 40s, they're still finding time, making time for tennis because they still enjoy it. Whereas the people they competed against back in the 90s, they're all retired. And in many cases, they were people who were practicing 5, 6 hours a day and just thinking tennis and nothing but tennis. And that's how you burn out. That's how something becomes not as much fun as it was before. That's how something can become a burden to you when it was once something that you enjoyed. I think you can enjoy something a lot longer if you develop other interests and have other things going on in your life.
Hmm. So, what I'm hearing surface is that harmony brings empowerment, enrichment to your passion rather than detracting from it.
Yes, yes, yes,
So, going back to our favorite Yankees, what would you say? You covered them. What
yes.
were your couple or two or three takeaways from seeing them play and see as a team? Because they have always, sometimes they get a bad rap that, oh, yeah, Yankees can bring in the top notch players, that Yankees this, Yankees that. And yet I've seen them come back time and time again, even if they have faced difficulties. So if you could share that, that would be great.
Okay, I will take 1996 as my first example because that team was not expected to do very well and they won
Mhm.
the World Series that year. That is my all time favorite team in any sport, the 1996 Yankees. Joe Torre became the manager that year. He had managed three other teams: Atlanta Braves, St. Louis Cardinals, New York Mets, and he had a losing record. But the Yankees hired him anyway because they knew he was good at bringing people from different backgrounds together, but he just had never had the most talented team before. One of the Yankee advisors, Milton Richmond, told me Joe Torre is the right man for this team because George Steinbrenner, the owner, will bring in the best talent. And when you see Joe Torre manage a team with great talent, you'll see a championship team. And that's exactly what happened. It was interesting to document that whole journey as a journalist. You have 25 players in the clubhouse, 25 different personalities. You have to mold them into a team. They don't all necessarily have to like each other, but they all have to work together toward achieving a common goal. And I saw how that group of 25 Yankees became a team in 1996, and they won the World Series. And there was a big ticker tape parade here in New York, and I got to ride on the media bus with the confetti falling on. They didn't know who was in the media bus, but I was in it, and they're throwing the confetti on us. And they go to City Hall, and the Yankees get keys to the city, and everyone in New York took pride in their accomplishment because it was so unexpected. That was not a Yankee team that people thought would be great. Now, 2 years later, in 1998, when the Yankees won the World Series again, everybody expected them to win. And, Divya, that brings a certain amount of pressure. When everyone expects you to win, there's sort of a target on your back. Everyone wants to take you down. But that Yankee team persevered, and they said, okay, everyone expects us to win. That doesn't mean we have to shrink in the face of that pressure. We can rise to that. And they won the World Series again in 1998 and 1999 and 2000 when everyone expected them to win. There's this cliche in sports, it's more difficult to win when people expect it to win, when you expect you to win, but not necessarily. If you approach it the right way, if you embrace that pressure and say, well, they're telling me I'm the best, so let me show them that I'm the best. And that's what that Yankee team did from 1998 to 2000. They did not shrink or wilt under pressure. They rose to the occasion and said, okay, we also believe we're the best.
Oh, love that. Don't shrink under stress. Rise up to it. Very powerful. Some very powerful statement here. And since you have covered, I know it's probably been covered to death about Williams' sisters, but from your unique perspective, what would you say are, again, a couple of takeaways for youngsters or for anyone for that matter?
I think it's so important. If you find something that you love, it's so important to have that parental support, to have the support of adults around you who can really encourage you and keep you on the straight and narrow. Make sure you don't get sidetracked. Okay, you may miss some parties on Friday night, Saturday night while you're practicing your tennis or practicing your musical instrument. But if you keep that major goal in mind, you'll realize that in the long run, it helps you to miss those parties and concentrate on developing your skills and being the best you can be. And I saw that in Venus and Serena, who were coached by their parents at the very beginning. Their parents had to get tennis books and videos to teach themselves enough to teach their daughters. And so it was a family project. And it's great to have that family connection of strong love and unyielding support for one another. And once you embark on that professional career, as we discussed earlier, you're not going to win everything right away. You have to deal with losing. And when you lose, you have to be able to take lessons from that. I lost because of, and go back and correct what you may have done wrong or improve in areas where you were weak, which caused you to lose. And I've seen the Williams sisters do that. They perfected their all-around game. And in Serena's case, she's regarded as the greatest female tennis player of all time. And she has more Grand Slam victories, 23, than any other player, male or female, in the history of what is called the Open era that began in 1968. Serena wasn't great right away, but she has continued to work at it and work at it. And she's a legend. Her sister Venus is a legend. And again, familial support, unconditional love, a strong work ethic, self-confidence, learning from mistakes, continuing to work hard, and not taking anything for granted. Once you get to the top, that doesn't mean you have to you have to fall right away. No one stays up there forever, but you can delay that fall as long as possible if you continue to work hard. And I saw in them a willingness to work even harder to try to stay on top than they did in their rise to the top. And that's an important
Mhm.
life lesson for anyone, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. So coming back full circle to journalists, let's say there may be folks who are just dabbing their feet in, whether it's entrepreneurs, journalists, even for that, like, somebody who wants to get their cause out there. So you mentioned about, connecting with different media outlets or even websites where they can comment.
Yes.
What are a couple of quick ways that our audience can take and find those media outlets to get seen and be heard?
Well, there's a reference book that's updated every year, the Writer's Digest. And I used to buy it every year when I was just starting out. It shows you different markets for your work, publications that will take work from freelancers or people who are not full-time journalists, and they'll publish you. You'll begin, you'll be able to establish relationships with editors who will work with you. It's a good guide because you can find out where you can submit your work and get positive feedback. Um, Failing that, again, blogging is a good way to get noticed, but commenting on blogs is an even better way to get noticed. Whatever you read, comment on it. And if it's constructive, then other people will reply to your comments and you can start a dialogue. And hopefully, the person who owns the blog will contact you and thank you for all your insightful comments and give you a chance to write a guest blog. That's a good way to break into the print side of things. And you can compile those blogs as news clips and submit them to a local newspaper or magazine, and perhaps you'll get a chance to write for them. And now you're getting paid to write. Now you are a professional, and that puts you on a whole different plateau. Taking the blog
Absolutely.
posts, using them as clips to get a paying job. And once you've done that, you're a professional, you're in the business. You can use those clips if you want to move up to a bigger newspaper, or if you're fine just where you are, it's in your hometown where you're comfortable. You can carve out a career for yourself writing for that publication. And on the
Mhm.
broadcast side of things, I think listening to podcasts, listening to radio shows, that sort of Sean Hannity technique of constantly calling in. So you become a familiar voice to the listeners. It's not your show, but they hear you almost every day. And either they
Mhm.
agree with you or they don't. But if they agree with you, it can lead to someone offering you a show or offering to make you the
Absolutely.
co host or a regular contributor to the show. And that can get your broadcast career going.
Very powerful. Thank you for being so open, for sharing
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you
all
for
the
inviting me.
strategies. I'm sure our listeners want to connect with you, know about your books. So tell us where they can connect and a bit about your books.
Oh, thank you. I have a website, cecilharrisbooks.com, and I've written 4 books. Sports history is my preferred genre. My last 2 books, I'll start from the back and work forward. My most recent book is on different strokes, Serena, Venus, and the Unfinished Black Tennis Revolution. Prior to that, I wrote Charging the Net, A History of Blacks in Tennis from Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe to the Williams sisters. Prior to that, I wrote Call the Yankees My Daddy, the baseball book about growing up a Yankees fan in New York City. And then I'm covering the team for a major newspaper and covering the World Series and traveling around watching the Yankees play and getting to know more about North America than I ever knew before because I was getting to go to all these cities and I write about that in the book as well. And my first book was on hockey. I covered the Carolina Hurricanes in Raleigh, North Carolina, a black man covering a predominantly white sport, and then I would meet the occasional black hockey player and we would trade stories because sometimes people did not want to let me in the arena. They didn't believe I was really there as a reporter. They thought I was trying to sneak in. So it was ridiculous on some levels when I would travel as a hockey writer. So I wrote about the history of blacks in the sport, mostly the players, but also stories about myself as a writer. And on my website, you'll see more information about those books. And I would welcome your listeners to contact me so we can establish your listeners and viewers to contact me. We can establish a dialogue and get to know each other that way.
Well, fascinating. Enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much, Cecil, for joining us and sharing your journey.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And thank you, listeners, because without you, the show would not be possible. And thank you for coming back and sharing stories. So, folks, as I mentioned, if you are helping somebody out and spending that 1 hour with no strings attached, send me your story and I will share your story out on the next podcast. So, thank you. And also want to thank Juan for his wonderful support. So until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.